So, BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions. Gonna be honest, this is not the video I wanted to make tonight, since I did make a promise to have the Nickelodeon vs. Capcom video up. But while the recording for that's done, getting all the clips together is becoming more of a hassle than I thought it would. So for now, I made a promise to get 31 videos out this month, and out of the ones for Asian American Heritage Month that I have left to do, this one might seem the easiest to make, since those others are going to take a bit of a while for me to properly make a script for. So a couple of months back, I was thinking about the radicalization and the dangers of hate groups, organizations, and how people are getting manipulated and recruited into dangerous ideologies. And as someone who did research on the Ku Klux Klan in the past, I guess what intrigued me was that now, grifting, i.e. people who spread and farm on outrage, bigotry, and hatred under the guise of criticism in order to make a living financially, which YouTube has had a problem with for a while. So when I heard Superman had fought the Klan in the comic book, I was interested to see how they were going to tackle this. Then you had the fact that this is going to be a loose adaptation of The Adventures of Superman. Basically, The Adventures of Superman was composed of multiple different radio series that ran from 1940 to 1951. And that radio helped popularize some of Superman's lore, such as the Daily Planet being the name of the newspaper Clark works for, to certain members of his cast, and actually extends upon the point where it actually originated his flight and weakness abilities. And it's the first time where Superman and Batman met. The comics that we're talking about was a 3-issue adaptation that kind of discussed the Klan, who they basically barely disguise as the Klan of the Fiery Cross. And it exposed the fact that the Klans aren't interested in hurting people when there's actually a risk of them getting caught. The biggest change is that when certain Klan members end up in police custody, a lot of them in the organization leaves, which ends up with the main antagonist having a breakdown. I mean, that whole episode was basically the KKK getting mocked for its illegal activities, and the entire series calling them cowards and repeatedly comparing them to Nazis, which we all know is true, especially since the Klan members who recognized the others got caught decided to flee and escape town to avoid getting arrested. So it's really impressive that this comic book managed to expand upon all of it, while still keeping the same characters and events from the story, but just fleshing them out. So basically what happens is, after Superman ends up stopping a dam from getting damaged by supervillains that's low-key revealed to have kryptonite, you'll find that out later, he ends up confronting a part of his background around the time a Chinese-American family known as the Lees are moving from Chinatown to downtown Metropolis after their father gets a job there. And the story kind of just does a dual focus on Clark as well as the Lee's children, Roberta Lee and her elder brother Tommy, who gets a crush on Jimmy. Roberta gets a crush on Jimmy, while she and Superman kind of try to figure out what's going on. In fact, it was written by Jean Luen Yang, a Chinese-American comic writer and cartoonist who usually writes about young people dealing with Chinese culture and their heritage, and drawn by Gurihiru, a Japanese illustrator team that also works on DC Comics, Marvel Comics, Dark Horse Comics, and Disney properties. I really like the way Yang fleshes out the story, and the art style is just so adorable and anime-like that it's just perfect for this type of story. The best part is that, no member or Superman or supporting cast member become racist jerks just because it would fit better with the time period. Since this takes place around 1946, I believe. No. Everyone who's not in the Klan are just decent human people who don't have any bigoted views towards anyone in the cast who's not white. Which are Superman's story with Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Perry White. I hope that would be the case coming in. Plus, having Superman and Roberta as co-leads are interesting because of what makes them both unique and ironically similar. Part of Superman's character development in this miniseries is that he needs to come to terms with his alien heritage, which he's initially dismissive of. Plus, there's the fact that he tries to act like he's above average superhuman when he suddenly recognizes that he might have the ability to fly, but he wants to keep it a secret as to not make anyone feel like he will alienate society and humanity, because he's presented himself as being just a stronger version of them, when if it was revealed that he was an alien, he feels like that's just going to distance everyone from him and that people will fear him, which we all know Superman, he doesn't want to be someone that's fair, but someone who helps out other people and, to be a beacon of hope and that type of symbolism. And once he does so, by the end of the story, he fully develops the rest of his abilities, which it's really great that they put that towards the end, because I really like how in the beginning we see that he actually uses his super speed to basically run across a telegraph wires, and that by finding his inner strength, he has to engage with his weaknesses first, his insecurities, and kryptonite in order to do so. And I really like how they handled Roberta. In the radio series, she didn't have any lines or name, and she was only mentioned in passing by her father. So for Gene to basically go out of his way to flesh out her, but not just the rest of her family, except for, okay, maybe the mom could have had a bit more to do. That's an actual critique that I will say, but it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But she's also the central character next to Superman. Like, we see how she was more introverted and how that led to people to thinking that she was jealous or someone who just never cared about others. And the fact that she also has to deal with her classmates kind of being insensitive at times, including the person that she's opposed to as the younger protagonist, who also has ties with her family involved in the KKK. But she ends up calling out said son of the KKK member for being jealous of her brother so much that he almost got her brother killed. And to her, like, she finds out about her father having ties to the villains. That helps her be able to figure out what she needs to do to help Superman in the climax. And she starts out wanting to leave Metropolis at the beginning of the story because the Klan attacked them. And just the struggles that she has with just accepting herself and fitting in, only to realize that's exactly what the Klan wants. And she ultimately chooses to fight against him with Tommy while also helping out Superman with his own issues. In fact, it's because of her that Superman is able to figure out exactly what some of his prevailing issues are, because she notices exactly what makes his new powers and things stand out. And she even questions him on why he's choosing to keep it a secret. Though she doesn't do it in a malicious way, so let's not get it twisted there. Then you have the fact that they actually use Chuck as a proper way to show that bigotry is something that you aren't born with, but it's either something you grow to embrace, you manipulate others into believing, or it's something you choose not to believe in. Like, I can understand and presume that there was some attempted backlash by pointing out or saying that because the main kid who did it was white, they're trying to say that white kids are evil, which really is not true. Like, Chuck starts out having borderline separationist beliefs, but that's mostly out of jealousy that Tommy does better than him in baseball. Well, it's so clear that his choice was that, he was groomed into attacking Roberta's family with the rest of the Klan, even though he intentionally missed because he really doesn't want to hurt him. Like, for a child to go through that, that's really something that, we instill with children, doing the right thing and stuff. And though Chuck starts off as a jerk, you do understand that it's mostly just out of insecurity. And it's still, it's his choice, but, he still didn't want to attack the family in the first place. And his mother is just like that ignorant bigot who doesn't recognize that what they're saying could actually contribute to that mentality. Because she even says that, hey, there's a reward going out to find out who attacked the family. But she says, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with people just wanting to live by themselves, which is where Chuck got that mentality from. But while she's not part of the KKK, you see how her methodology affects him and how that could inspire someone else to join based on the fact that it's basically just being normalized in his family. And then you have his uncle actively trying to recruit him into the group. And his uncle Matt shows that alongside his own mother, your parental figure might not always be the best at teaching you these methodologies, but it's important for you yourself to experience things you've never done and also meet out and experience other people in order to make your own conclusions instead of just blindly following what some of your parents tell you, because a lot of bigotry can just stem from learning from older figures or family members who are steadfast in a lot of backwards beliefs. And you understand where he's coming from, because he's just a normal white kid who just never wanted to believe his uncle was a bad person or that his family's evil. That doesn't necessarily make him evil, and the story makes it clear that he's not evil or a bad person. It's just that his uncle went too far down the path that he went through, and Chuck realizes that that's not a path that he should follow. If you see your father figure basically becoming a bigot and attacking innocent people for no reason, eventually you're going to start to realize, okay, well, I still clearly have my biases towards my family, but this is something I can't accept, and that's going too far. And it's really cool that Chuck had that development and growth. They don't just say that he's a bad person or treat him as a bad person. They allow him to understand and realize what he did was wrong and actively try to fix that mistake. I know someone's going to argue that the story is very censored on its anti-racism message, but they directly call it the fact that the major Imperial isn't someone who's actually 100% racist, but that they're basically a grifter that wants to profit off the Klan in order to fund their operations. And it also explores the downsides to that, given that the Klan's downfall is that everyone who actually has a conscience in the story either recognizes that they're being used by them in order to spread hate and division, or that when they're actually faced with someone who's willing to take them head on like the cowards and sniveling bigots that they are, they actually are able to run away in fear, while we actually see people come together and basically counter their ideology just by being decent human beings that care about each other. It also helps that the story is just really, really funny when it wants to be. Like, you have the backstory where Clark is worried he's going to use his heat vision to hurt someone, and then Lana shows up and then beats the crap out of his bullies. Then you have the Klansmen who bombed the Unity Center thinking that they died, only to start asking why there's a Jewish rabbi in heaven, even though the only damage that happened was that his foot was caught on fire. You have the main antagonist threatening the hostages they kidnapped with a sword that turned out to be a toy sword they forgot to move the price tag off of. Then you have the main villain insisting the Klan doesn't stand for hate and has no ounce of hatred in their hearts, while they're all wearing full robes and hoods surrounding a teenager that they're trying to victimize, which is so realistic to how in denial racists are in their own bigotry that it actually flips around to being funny. Again, considering the fact that the radio show and the author behind it use information from Inside Secrets and publishing about those secrets in text for both the Klan to become a punchline and the apathetic losers that they are, I'm actually going to be glad that they injected as much humor as they did in this comic while being genuine about what the Klan believes. Plus, we talked about Asian Americans for the majority of the month, and I remember reading a comment that said, as an Asian American, this person needs to remember that the culture is not to be ashamed of, but also be wary of those who don't want us to exist. And I think that's a very poignant message that we should live for. A lot of grifters, whether they believe it or not, do parrot around these toxic ideologies, and while it's not something one person can just easily stop, the fact that there's basically now becoming a counterculture against this mentality proves that, yeah, you shouldn't just blindly follow groups, especially when there are people who don't really have those same beliefs, but they're just profiting off of it because, again, they're selfish and they're okay with letting other people get hurt for the sake of their own agenda, which I'm glad this series ends up having a lighthearted take on this, where, again, the message ultimately ends up being that you don't need to end up giving yourself into bigotry, self-hatred, isolation, or rejecting who you are just because of the sake of a few people that just want to either make you suffer or blindly ignorant or refuse or just chooses to let that ignorance guide them to make harmful decisions. We are all better than that, and we all have the potential to be better than that and support one another in dire times. And even in a world where bigotry is something that won't be erased, at least we could do our part to combat it together. And I really do genuinely feel like Superman Smashes the Klan is something that everyone should read. Even if it's just for fun, especially if you're a kid who's growing up right now, especially given that in the past couple of years, Asian hate kind of went way overboard, even though it should have never existed in the first place. I think it's just a very fun read with a lot of heart towards it, and I really hope you guys check it out. Yeah, wasn't expecting it to be my last video of the month, but considering that the reason I'm here is because of, well, Asian Americans, I'm really just grateful that a story like this was allowed to be told, and I really hope you guys give it a chance. Yeah, sorry for the ramble, but that's all I got for this one, and we'll see what I do with the next videos in the rest of the week, and BIP Bizarre Productions. Thanks for letting me ramble, and signing off.